Okay, well, I'm Dwayne Jones. I'm Director of Parks and Recreation here in the city of Waynesboro. My team members, Stephanie is here, Lead Project Manager. This is a Zoom meeting to go over the preliminary master plan for the South River Preserve. First of all, we apologize we weren't able to do this in person because of COVID. Also, we want to thank all of our stakeholder members and groups that came back in February. This is the follow-up meeting for that. Will also be a posted PDF of the plans. And then at the end of the plans, there'll be an email, and you can email us with any comments. But we, on behalf of the city, we're very excited about this project taking place in downtown Waynesboro, what we've dubbed the South River Preserve, which will be a fantastic project once it is out. And we have assembled a great team. We've been working hard on developing the master plan and all the work behind it with the groups that we work with, the stakeholders, several meetings on site. And so we're delighted to turn it over to David Anhole with Anhole and Associates to go over the master plan for the South River Preserve.
All right, well, thanks so much, Dwayne. I'm David Anhole with Anhole Associates. We're landscape architects and park designers located in Greenwood, Virginia. We're the lead consultants for the team. Other team members include Timmons Group from Richmond that provided engineering and surveying services, as well as Dr. Dan Crystal, that's our ornithology consultant. So we're excited to present kind of an overview of the preliminary master plan today for public review and comment. And we're going to try to run through the presentation somewhat quick. And as Dwayne mentioned, comments, you'll be able to make comments directly to the park staff after viewing the presentation. So this is this slide shows an aerial view of the existing site. Looking into the park area, looking toward the west, toward the downtown area. And you can see that the South River divides the park site into two parcels, and the parcels are noted by the red line, but there's a 22-acre parcel lying on the west side of the river, and then a 6-acre parcel lying on the east side of the river. From a land use standpoint, you can see that the character of the park is currently consists of open lawn areas as well as a large parking area that was formerly used by DuPont. The existing greenway runs along the South River. The Dominion Pavilion is located in kind of the central area of the park. And then there's also an existing amphitheater and a farmer's market pavilion located in the north area of the park. And so you can see how the park relates to the downtown area and how it relates to the urban grid of Broad Street and Main Street and Short Street by the Coal Tower building. Based on NERDA funding, there's a number of important restoration goals that we need to meet with the design. We need to create wildlife and songbird habitat throughout the park. We need to provide improved fish habitat and water quality, provide river access for anglers as well as for recreation. We also need to improve the fishing and recreational opportunities for the park, protect the land and restore the natural systems. And in addition to these goals, we think there's also some other very important project opportunities for the project. We think that this project can be a restoration model for mercury damaged sites around the state as well as the nation. We feel like due to the location of the park site that there's a high visibility potential for restoration, education, and messaging. We think that the project will highlight kind of the importance of environmental stewardship, restoring civic and human connections to nature. And we also feel that the park can really serve as a transformative role for the economic revitalization of the city and specifically the downtown area and the surrounding neighborhoods. The this is a slide showing the preliminary master plan. And from the big picture standpoint, the fabric of the park is really composed of a number of important programmatic threads. And those threads are the Parks and Recreational and event program, the fish and wildlife, or the fish habitat improvements, as well as songbird and wildlife improvements and stormwater quality, as we mentioned. So you can see from an organizational standpoint that there's a series of open spaces or recreational activity areas that are shown in kind of the light green color. And those are kind of ranged in a kind of linear fashion along the South River. The plan, I should mention, the plan is oriented so north is to the left, and you can see that Broad Street and Main Street are on the left-hand side of the plan, and Short Street enters the park through the sort of the central area, and then downtown is oriented to the bottom of the sheet. The dark green areas represent the songbird habitat areas, and you can see that those really create an organizational framework kind of throughout the park. They create the edges for the open spaces. They also create the framework for pedestrian system and recreational access. And the South River, the fish habitats would be located, I guess, upstream from the north, from the Main Street Bridge, rather. So the next series of slides, we want to zoom in on some of the particular areas of the park and kind of talk about those in a little more detail. So this is the north area of the park. You can see Broad Street and Main Street, as well as the future museum building and the existing amphitheater, which is shown by Circle 2, really create the identity and character for this part of the park. We are creating a new sort of organizational system. Between the two bridges, we're creating a new open space and a new terrace that helps connect this area and provide connections for pedestrians moving between the museum and the river, as well as moving between Broad Street and Main Street. And we would see this area would really function for any number of sort of public events. The Main Street Market is an area, sort of a circular area that straddles Main Street. We see this as function as an important sort of entrance feature for downtown as well as the park. The shape of that space is inspired by perhaps the shape of a bird nest or a shape of some of the early sort of springs in Waynesboro. And this space would largely be paved, and it would function for just numerous events and civic uses. So it could be used for the weekly farmers market. It could be used for food truck areas. It could be used for performances and a number of spaces that, or any number of functions that may require a harder surface. The Circle 9 is the main event pavilion for the park, and you can see that it faces the Great Lawn. The Great Lawn is about a 2.5 acre space that would function as the primary event space for the park. We are showing some additional parking spaces along Race Avenue. I think it's about 73 spaces that would be sort of arranged in a perpendicular fashion to the street, and those would provide kind of a day-to-day access to the park. We are preserving the existing greenway as well as a Dominion Pavilion. We're actually showing a extension or expansion of the bankfull bench along the river with the potential of an angler access trail and recreational access trail along the river in that area. And we've also created a three-dimensional model for the park design. And so this is an image that shows kind of the three-dimensional character of the northern end of the park. So you can see how the open spaces and the habitat areas are arranged to correspond to the urban grid system and to create the spaces and the character for the park. The museum is shown at the lower left, the future museum, and you can see how well that the main event lawn could serve larger events. The southern end of the park is notable for the removing of the existing DuPont parking lot, and as well as the existing short street improvements that currently provide access to that area. So we're keeping the organizational access for Short Street, and you can see how that sort of moves into the park and extends all the way to the South River. That area would be converted to what we're calling the Short Street pedestrian promenade. There would be some handicap parking in that area, as well as a drop-off area, and then various or kind of a variety of pedestrian and park improvements as you move toward the river. And those would include possibility or potential for a restroom area, native pollinator gardens, and then something that we're calling the Discovery Hill, which would be kind of a rustic amphitheater that would overlook the river and provide, educational and viewing opportunities for the South River. We're also showing a deck, a river overlook deck that's shown by Circle 17, and that's a structure with cantilever over the South River and give views up and down the river. So moving to the south, to the right, we're showing the location for a picnic pavilion and a series of picnic and nature play areas. And moving toward the river, we're showing a semicircular space that we're referring to, or we're calling the River Theater. And so we think that's a very exciting space, and it's the idea that the steep bank of the river would be graded back maybe as much as 100 to 150 feet, and we would create a gently sloping lawn and a series of, gently sloping sidewalks that would give just very easy access to the river, to the edge of the river, and access to the river itself. Moving further to the right, once the parking lot is removed, we're showing that area would be completely regraded to create a new riparian ecosystem, and what we're calling the West Woods, which would be the primary habitat for nesting songbirds in the park. And so the landform would be created such that it would collect surface water and create kind of in a series of little stream features. This area could also accept water that would flow back from the South River during some flood events, and also create water features, create water access for the songbird habitat in that area. We're also showing how the greenway can be realigned to work with the new design, and also how the bankful bench could be improved for angler access in this area as well. And then again, kind of a three-dimensional character view of the south area of the park. You can see the restroom facility to the left, and the picnic pavilion that's located in the center with a series of lawns and public gardens. moving toward the River Theater. So the east side of the park, east side of the river, we see would be designed primarily for songbird habitat, and this would serve migratory songbirds that would be moving up and down the Blue Ridge Mountains in the flyway in the spring and the fall. And so this area would have a canopy forest. Habitat would consist of a canopy forest with understory plantings that would support the bird populations. We would try to minimize the human interaction between the birds and the people, but really try to keep any kind of human activities to the perimeter of the area. There is a small parking lot that serves a birding trail and a bird blind. We're showing pedestrian trails to the perimeter of the area that would provide access to a semicircular area at the river, and also the possibility of a bridge connection from the neighborhood. So one of our big sort of bird design concepts is that we want to keep people, or we want to get people to the river and discourage the use of the river from birds, so they can stay away from impact or stay away from mercury impacts. And then again, just a three-dimensional view of the east side of the river, showing how the habitat and would work, and also would show how we would concentrate people along the river itself. This slide just shows a little summary of the sort of the gathering spaces and event spaces in the park. You can see the existing greenway, existing proposed greenway shown with a red line. The prominent gathering spaces are shown with the red circles, and those would be very functional for school groups and outdoor classes, as well as picnicking and play areas. The main event spaces are shown in yellow, and those consist of the Great Lawn, the Main Street Market, as well as existing amphitheater and open space between the two bridges. So if you add up the areas for those three spaces, it's 3.8 acres. And then just using sort of rule of thumb spacing calculations, it appears that area or those areas could accommodate as many as 10,000 people in the park. And this slide shows kind of the character view for the main event lawn and how that would look. It also shows the Main Street Market in the distance, and how that might serve a farmer's market, how that might serve food trucks and other events. This slide sort of focuses in on the Main Street Market and sort of gives an indication of the character of that space. And again, you can see how it would function for various events, but it would also be our intent that it would function as a very powerful entrance feature, and could also be used for any number of park and recreational functions when it's not being used for events. This slide shows sort of the current thinking for phase one. I think it's just important to note that the current funding level from NERDA is not going to allow us to build the entire master plan, that the design will have to be built in various phases. And so we think that it makes sense for phase one to concentrate on the area that's south of Main Street. And so the red line kind of shows there that we're thinking about, based on the NERDA funding, that it's going to be critical that we address their goals. And phase one is going to have to concentrate on bird habitat. It's going to have to concentrate on fish habitat as well as angler access. And then there's also the potential that giving funding levels from the city, that we could include some additional park and recreational programming and functions as a part of the a part of phase one. So thinking a little bit or talking a little bit about our songbird habitat objectives. Our strategy would be that we would provide full life cycle conservation measures. And that means that we would not only concentrate on providing habitat for nesting birds, but we would provide habitat for migrating birds that move up and down the mountain flyway in the spring and in the fall. We would want to promote connectivity to migratory bird habitat around the city to other nearby parks and forests. We would want to optimize the park design for songbird conservation and really provide the best quality of songbird habitat that we can. And we also want to provide high quality birding and educational opportunities with the idea that birding can be an economic driver for the city and promote the economic revitalization of the downtown area. The phase one bird habitat consists of what we're calling kind of the primary habitat nesting areas. And those consist of what we're calling the east woods. So those would be east of the South River at the top of the sheet. And we see this area is really being developed as a canopy forest with understory plantings, trees and woody shrubs. And it would primarily serve the migratory bird stopover habitat. What we're calling the western woods is to the lower right of this plan. And again, this would be, we would be developing a canopy forest in this area with understory plantings. And we would view this as serving primarily for the nesting habitat during the summer periods. There's also the opportunity for some additional primary habitat along the South River, along the riverbanks. And then we also see the habitat, really creating a framework kind of throughout the park. And so there's secondary habitat opportunities that would, again, define the edges and the spaces throughout the park. Those would also consist of canopy tree plantings with understory native plants. There's open lawn areas we think also have potential for bird habitat, that installing bird feeders and bird nesting boxes, we can attract the birds that would be able to use that habitat, and those would include bluebirds or other types. And so obviously the park is it's a large area, and there's going to be important budget decisions that are going to have to be made. And so the eastern and western woods make up about 11 acres of the park. And so we feel that, and of course, given the sort of the open nature of those areas, is that, obviously we can't come in and just, install a canopy from day one, but we really see the strategy as being one of really reforestation. But these areas would need to be planted with tree seedlings as probably the predominant planting, but as budget permits, we would also include larger caliper tree plantings that would allow the canopy to develop a little faster. And we would probably concentrate those types of plantings in and around the park open spaces. This slide just kind of shows a list of the tree and understory and herbaceous plant palette that we're looking at. It's our idea that the palette would consist entirely of native species, and we would use the species that would provide the best quality bird habitat. As I mentioned, we think the lawn areas would also provide important bird habitat for certain species. And this slide shows some of the plant palette that could provide that habitat to the birds shown. And as I mentioned, really the planting strategy is going to be one that's going to take a while to fill in. The habitat areas are going to be, or the plant material that's installed in these areas is probably going to start out as being small. And so the next series of slides show how that plant material, as well as the bird species that are attracted to those particular habitats, might work in a successional strategy over time. So this slide shows maybe an image of what the western woods may look like. You can see the bird blind in the middle, and so it shows a character of that area, as well as the particular bird species that may be attracted to that type of habitat. And so obviously the trees are going to be a little smaller. We see the ground plane is really being a little more dominated by native grasses and herbaceous materials. And perhaps this image shows what the western woods may look like at the 15 to 30 year stage. As you see, the canopy is starting to get a little height and starting to provide shade that will allow us to move from a grassy and herbaceous understory to more of a woody understory. And likewise, you can see that how the bird species would change to use that successional planting habitat. And so this slide shows the 30-year stage, moving more toward mature canopy forest, which is ultimately what the songbirds need for full life cycle conservation. And so you can see the design will be dominated by the canopy forest. We'll have any number of sort of understory trees, as well as shrubby understory plantings, and how and you can see how the bird species will change with this habitat. Well, and just we did want to talk about the fish habitat enhancements a little bit, the river habitat enhancements. This slide just shows kind of the strategy, the overall strategy. We're thinking that the river enhancements would really concentrate on the area upstream from the Main Street Bridge, and those enhancements would include improvements to the existing cross veins, would include expansion of the bankful benches, installing converging rock clusters and logs in the river, as well as the potential for restoring the Rockfish Run stream channel. In the next series of slides, we want to kind of zoom in on some of the fish habitats, give a little more detail about those areas. So this shows, I'm sorry, so we want to zoom in on the areas adjacent to the existing DuPont parking lot. So you can see that shown in the sort of with the gray circles, there's two existing cross veins that are currently in the river, and those provide fish habitat. Those allow the river to scour out sort of deeper pools downstream and provide good fish habitat. But based on our site evaluations, those cross veins are not working quite as well as they could. And so we're proposing that we would install additional sort of header stones on top of those existing cross veins to raise up the elevations, which would help direct water more toward the center of the stream and scour those downstream pools out in a better way, those would be deeper. It would help protect the fish from bird predation. Would also help keep the water cleaner or the water cooler, which would be good for the fish. So in addition to raising the cross veins, we would also install woody debris in as a part of those rock cross veins. We would have rocks or logs that would be a part of that system, and those would increase the habitat as well as the food sources for the fish. The green areas are, we're showing kind of the expansion of the bankful benches to narrow the river channel, which would help keep the water also cooler, would make the channel deeper and protect the fish in those areas and provide for better habitat. We're also showing how a converging rock cluster could be located in this area, and that would also have woody material installed for habitat and as a food source. The sort of moving downstream to the area just above the Main Street Bridge, there's also an existing cross vein in that area that we would rehabilitate. We would add additional stones to that to again direct the water more to the center of the stream and dig out the existing downstream pool. We would install a number of converging rock clusters with woody debris, create good habitat in that area. We're also showing in the green how the bankful bench could be expanded for angler access and to narrow the channel for fish habitat improvements. Just quickly, we feel that it would be beneficial to realign the existing Rockfish Run stream channel to address some erosion sediment control issues and water quality issues that are associated with the channelized condition currently. And we're proposing that the Rockfish Run would enter the South River at a little more favorable angle to reduce erosion and water quality issues in that area. This slide just shows some imagery of what some of the fish habitat, river habitat enhancements could look like. So you can see that how some of the converging rock clusters could work in the middle of the river, how the cross veins direct water to the center of the river and contribute to scouring out the downstream pools. And then just kind of as we wrap up the presentation, this is again just using the three-dimensional model that we have for the design, kind of shows the entire park and kind of a bird's eye view. And so again, you can see how the series of open spaces are aligned or arranged along the river, and how the habitat, the dark green habitat areas create those spaces and define those spaces, and how the Parks and Recreational Program is integrated throughout the property. Just another model view of the River Theater looking to the north. And again, we think this is just really a fabulous feature that this provides just easy access to the river. We imagine there could be a series of stones or rocks that would define that edge and allow people opportunity to jump into the water, or to sun, or just enjoy nature and enjoy the views to the river. And then finally, this slide does show some historic images for the South River that we gathered together early on in the process, and we think these were especially compelling. I think it shows how very early how important that the South River was to the city as a recreational resource, as a civic resource, and we've tried to keep these images in mind as we've as we've worked out the master plan. And in some ways, the park is kind of going back to the future a little bit with trying to connect the city back to the river and back to nature. And so with that, we conclude the presentation, and we would just again highlight that if you have questions or comments about the design of the park or anything that you would want to discuss further, that you can connect or contact the Parks and Recreation folks through the email address shown here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to, again, thank Anhold Landscape Architects, Dave and Jenny and the Timmons Group, Dr. Dan and Crystal for all their work over these past several months. I did want to give, we're going to open up the comment period for around 2 weeks or so. So review the plans, send us comments of things you like, things you dislike. Questions, if you have particular questions about the plan. There'll also be a PDF that you can study in more detail. I also want to give you a quick update on the timeline. So once we receive our final public comments and if there's any minor changes to the plans, we can make those. From there, we're going to move into the engineering phase, late summer into fall, to fully engineer and cost estimates out for the phase 1 part of the plan. Hopefully, if all goes well, we will have a full set of drawings ready to go out to bid in late spring or early summer of 21, and then take the summer of 21 to build out with an anticipating of fall of 21, having certain sections of the South River Preserve open. So we are super excited about this as a transformative project in downtown Waynesboro, and we appreciate your comments, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you.